Hello, my name is Robert Cuff. Welcome to the virtual opening of my one-man show, Atmospheres, at the Warden's House Gallery in Mount Holly, New Jersey. I wish we could see the paintings together in this space, but because of current situations, we can't do that. Hopefully it's going to be over soon. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and then show you some paintings. I've been a representational painter for over 30 years. I started when I was a kid. I used to have a love of drawing. I was influenced by a TV show on Saturday morning that I used to watch from a man named Gene London. What Gene London would do is he would draw pictures along while he told stories. I used to sit there and try to follow along with him as he drew. My interest in drawing continued throughout high school when I discovered Salvador Dali and I began to paint. I started painting melting Coke bottles and things in the sky that shouldn't be there. My interest in art continued through college. I studied graphic design, drawing, and art. I got a job as a graphic designer after college. About this time, I wanted to paint again, so I found a painter who taught me the art of underpainting. Underpainting is where you literally paint a black and white version of what you are working on and use fan brushes to blend it together. Over top of that goes color. I had paintings that were very dramatically lit and very high contrast, and they would take a long time to do. Roughly, some could take 200 hours. This is an example of one here. This is me in my younger days. I painted like this throughout the 80s and the 90s. And at about the end of the 90s, I decided I wanted to try something different. So I found and discovered Plein Air Painting. Plein Air is P-L-E-I-N-A-I-R. It's a French word that means out of doors. I thought they were beautiful paintings because they were so immediate and fresh. Literally, all you had to do was to take a small easel, walk outside, set up, and just paint what was right in front of you. Plein air painting is challenging because the light outside changes in 4 hours. After 4 hours, you're looking at something totally different. So the challenge is to capture your values correctly, as well as maintaining a sense of distance in your picture. It's quite challenging. But what I'll do is, why don't I show you a couple of the plein airs that I've done recently in the other room here. Hi, as I said, I started plein air painting. Around this time I got married, so maybe that was something different that pushed me to try something a little bit different. Also, at this time, we decided to move to a town along the Delaware River called Delanco. We wanted to be near the water, and I thought it was a great opportunity to provide a lot of places to paint. But I'm going to show you a couple of plein air paintings. This first painting is called River Mist. It's a painting from my backyard on a foggy day on the Delaware River. This next painting over here is called Ruski's Ridge. It was painted from my neighbor's back patio. What I was trying to do with this painting is maintain a sense of a bright, clear foreground, as well as get the sense of distance going across the river. If we come into this room here, there's a couple more. Here are a couple more plein airs I wanted to show you. This is a place called Millrace Village. It's right here in Mount Holly. I always liked this because it was such a bright, nice feeling. It was a happy painting to me. The middle painting here is called the Philadelphia Yacht Club. It was drawn first and then painted from Hawk Island, which is right across the Delaware River from Philadelphia here. Most of my paintings are oil on canvas or linen. I started using palette knives recently. However, they're not on these examples. What a palette knife can do, it can help you layer the paint on, and you can create textures by cutting into the paint, layering it on top of previous layers, and getting all kinds of great textures in terms of a side of a building, marble, concrete, and it has a freshness and immediacy to it that doesn't look overworked. This third painting is called Riverton Yacht Club. The Riverton Yacht Club is a historic building. It's been in active use since 1865. This building here was a steamboat stop along the Delaware River that would take passengers from Philadelphia up to Trenton. A lot of artists come and paint this building. What I was trying to capture here was just the time of day and the freshness of the light. I'll show you a couple more paintings over here. This is a still life of some things that my parents had. The teacup was my mother's. The pocket watch was my father's. I started doing still lifes at about this time. The painting next to it was produced using museum board. Museum board is a great support for paintings. It's this high quality archival cardboard that you prime with something like shellac, and you get a great smooth painting surface. This was from Cape Henlopen down in Delaware. Cape Henlopen is an island that's between the Atlantic Ocean and the Delaware Bay. It was the way that I was looking down this path of sand going all the way out into beyond it was the Atlantic Ocean. And it was the time of day. It was later in the day, and the sun was just starting to rake from the left. And I thought, the way your eye led down the path appealed to me, and I thought it would be a good painting. There's a painting over here I want to show you. This was an image that I had of my father, and I always wanted to do something with it, so I decided to paint it. What I tried to do was be kind of loose around here, but save all the detail for his eyes and his expression. Well, he's frowning. He looks a little bit disappointed, or he's thinking is what he's doing. He's thinking, and he's slightly embarrassed, I think. He wanted to know why I wanted to use him as a model in a painting. But like all parents, they want to cooperate with their children whenever they ask for something, and he wanted to help. Now, when you're a kid or a young adult, you don't want to be told that you're starting to look like your mother and father. I don't know, what do you think? I think he would have liked it. I'm going to show you some landscapes that were produced from a combination of on-site sketches and reference images in the studio. The first painting that I want to show you is here. It's called Zerbrug View. It's another vision from where I live in Delanco, New Jersey. What impressed me about this space standing there is the feeling of a panoramic view that I felt standing there. And I tried to replicate that by choosing a format that was long and narrow, so that hopefully you start one side and you go all the way across the river, the way you see there. I'm going to start with another painting over here. What I do a lot of times is I'll do sketches first, and then from that try to use my memory as well as some reference photos, so that I can create these pictures, and I use the photos and move things around in them as I need to quantify and clarify what I'm trying to do. When I told you we moved to the Delaware River, one of the benefits that we didn't know was that there are incredible sunsets. I don't know whether it's influenced by the air, the river, or both, or the seasons as well. But we get incredible sunsets that I think are as good as anywhere. This sunset here is from the winter time, as this is where the sun sets in the winter. What I tried to do with this painting was to work on it in layers and not have such a detailed, painstakingly approach to it. I wanted it to be a little bit more loose, and of course our focus was right on the sun, which I really gooped a lot of paint on there to try to bring it out. If we step into the next room here, this next painting you see here is called Outback. It was created from an image that my wife took. And it was appealing because the angle, it's a low angle view. Your eye goes from the foreground all the way down to where that city is. I made the city larger on purpose because out in the distance, it almost seems like there's a feeling of hope, contrasted against these low-hanging clouds that indicate a storm to me. If we come to this next painting, it's called Bucks County Fall. This was an image that I took when I was attending a workshop in Washington's Crossing on Plein Air Painting. I really like this because the horizontal format really appealed to me, and I tried to keep the sense of distance as we go from here to the middle ground and all the way out there to those mountains in the background. If we come over here, this is another painting from the river where I live. This is called Sunday Morning. What I was trying to do here was kind of try to get the feeling of this silent water that it makes no noise, but it moves the boats up and down. And it just has such a tranquil feeling when you're in this kind of a space. You hear nothing at all, but you just see this water moving, nothing at all, no sound whatsoever. I wanted to keep the background loose and not be so focused on the details that could have overwhelmed the painting. If we come over here now, this is the painting I just completed. It's called Watcher. It was taken from an image that my wife took. One morning, our next door neighbor had me standing right in our backyard, just staring out at the distance in the river. It was a great image to me. I thought, well, geez, she looks kind of lonely or isolated. So I thought, well, why don't we try a narrow composition to kind of reinforce that idea of being kind of alone and isolated. I use this device of the tree going up on the side to kind of draw your eye across the river and up into the sky. I kept it loose, but saved all the detail for her right here. If we look at this next painting over here, as I said before, the sunsets where we live is incredible. I thought, why don't we try a painting of just sky? And I thought this could be an exercise in complementary colors being adjacent to one another, to see how they would play back and forth. I intentionally oversaturated each of these blue and orange colors to really bring that idea out, and I think it does. The painting just next to it is another landscape in the studio. This was taken when I attended a workshop in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania it's a destination for travelers in the fall because of the foliage. It's unbelievable up there. But this image was at the scene where we were working, and it appealed to me because I wanted to try to maintain this distance of the stream in the background and having your eye move down towards the front, and try to maintain that among this really busy landscape surrounding it because of the changing seasons and the way the leaves were changing and just changing over to winter. Over here in the corner is an earlier landscape when I was trying to just become less detailed and just focus on what I was feeling when I saw this image. This is the Delaware River up in the wintertime up in Bucks County. I intentionally left this blurry and wanted to just focus on the foreground here. This next painting over here is called Bay View. It's a scene from down at the Jersey Shore at the bay. The exercise I thought would work was to take this, if you can see it here, there's a bridge, an abandoned bridge. I wanted that to lead your eye across the bay and hopefully up into the sky. Now I'm going to tell you about some recent paintings I've done. Those are in the next room. These paintings are executed over the past 2 years. I wanted to incorporate figures back into my work, as well as incorporate the dramatic lights and darks that I had liked to paint back in the 80s and 90s. So what I decided to do was to do 2 series of paintings. The first series is from a restaurant and the people in it, and the second is a series of street musicians. If you come in here, I can show you. This is the first painting in the restaurant series. It's called Supers and Diners. It's oil on birch wood. What I tried to do here was to keep the dramatic lighting that I was really feeling in the space at the time and concentrate it right on the figures as you see them here. The background, I rendered it with this palette knife you see in my hand here, as well as the foreground too. Let's come over here to another painting. It's from the same restaurant, different time of day. It's called Sisters. Again, I wanted to incorporate dramatic lighting of darks against really bright lights. And by doing that, I wanted your eye to be led right down to the figures in the foreground. And I think it accomplishes that. I want to know what they're talking about. The painting next to it is appropriately called Brothers. It's the same idea of highly contrasted space, but we have 2 men in the background contrasted with these 2 brightly lit men in the foreground. I think it's a good composition and it works. I want to know what these 2 men in the foreground are talking about. The next series I painted was using street musicians. I've worked in Center City for a long time, Center City, Philadelphia, and I've gotten a chance to see a lot of different people. And I always had an admiration for street musicians. I admire their dedication and their determination, as a lot of them are there in all kinds of weather year-round. There's something about their solitude of standing there just playing their hearts out. I admire it. I don't believe I could do it. But I thought I'd like to use them in a series of paintings. Now, with this series of paintings, what I was trying to do was to first keep the same dramatic lighting as in the restaurant series, but I wanted to try a limited palette this time. What a limited palette does, it harmonizes a painting. By cutting down the amount of colors that you use, no matter what color you use in the painting, is mixed from the same 3 colors, so that all the colors are related, if that makes sense. And I started to see musicians that would be playing in City Hall in Philadelphia. If you're familiar with City Hall in Philadelphia, there are these tunnel-like structures that are in between the street and the center courtyard. Well, what these tunnel-like structures have are these really soaringly high spaces inside with these massive stone columns and these gargoyle-like creatures at the top. But the beauty of it is that inside this tunnel-like space, there's a certain resonance that really attracts musicians to it. It not only echoes the sound, but it makes it feel fuller. So I could certainly understand why they would be attracted to there in the first place. So that's where some of these paintings took place. So let me show you the first one over here. This first painting is called Resonance. As you can see, there's a limited palette all around here, but I saved all the color for the 2 musicians playing. You can see here where I use the palette knife to just try to scrape in some highlights and textures involving the stone here. And what it did was it just gives an indication of those textures, and without doing an enormous amount of work. And I've even left some of the canvas bare underneath. So I think it's quite effective. This was purchased by some friends of ours who were gracious enough to let me use it for the show. This painting shows the same cellist from the first painting that I just showed you. The composition is the same with dramatically lit darks and lights and a limited palette. Again, all the color is saved just for her. And again, I use the palette knife to really just lay in these areas of color here in the foreground and around the stones. Continuing with this theme of City Hall, this next painting over here is called Players. It's taken from the same intense vertical space under City Hall. I chose this kind of a vertical compressed format to accentuate the height that they were painting it, that they were playing in. And the fact that the three were a trio, they were one unit to me, appealed to me. That's why I chose this unusual format to try to accentuate that. I see this as a smaller study for a larger painting that I intend to execute at a later date. If we come over here, this next painting is called Busker. Busker is another name for street musicians. I really didn't know that, but if you Google Busker, you'll find a lot of street musicians. His face was really hidden. To me, he had a certain anonymity to him. Every time I would see him play, his head was always be pointed down to the ground. I suppose I wanted to respect that and not bring out who he actually was. I mean, I indicated his eyes a little bit there. But it almost seemed like what was happening was something busy in here where he was playing, and somehow it felt like I should relate it. I should bring all this out in here, as that's where he was playing. It's a larger version of a study I completed last year. It's the same idea with the dramatically lit subject, only this time there's strong light coming from the top. And I wanted to keep the focus right on the guitar player and just keep the detail right in here so it would pop out. Again, I used the palette knives in here, and all around to just indicate what was happening in the outside structures. I have one more painting over here, our final in the series. Hi, this last painting in the series is called Sonata. What I wanted to do here was the same as the other paintings with these highly contrasted spaces. What I had been hoping is that these strong dark against this bright light would serve to really pop out our focus of the painting of this young man playing the violin. I think what helps is this long shadow that brings our eye from the left all the way up to focus just on him. And I think it was successful. Well, those are the paintings I wanted to show you today. I want to thank you for looking at my virtual opening today. I also want to thank the Burlington County Parks, the Warden's House Gallery, Anthony Jacobson and his staff, and my wife Michelle, who's constant source of suggestions and criticism, which I don't always like, but she's usually right. I hope we have the opportunity to see you in a gallery again soon. Thank you.